Hey everyone, it's triplemangothreat, and today we're talking about a deck that wants us to play additional lands, and when we do, we get to draw cards, and by having all this extra mana, we can cast some huge spells. Let's jump right into it. Our commander is Aesi, Tyrant of Gyre Strait. For 4 green and a blue, we have a 5/5 Serpent. It's going to let us play an additional land on each of our turns, and when a land enters our battlefield under our control, we get to draw a card. Being able to play those additional lands are going to help us get landfall triggers like nobody's business with cards like Zendikar Royal, Spore Mound, Rampaging Baloths, and Colony Heart Expedition. Whenever a land enters our battlefield, we're going to be able to create some tokens and even ramp from cards like Colony Heart Expedition, which is going to get even more lands on our battlefield to trigger all of our landfall cards. We have some more landfall with cards like Retreat to the Coral Helm and Retreat to Kazandu. Again, when a land enters the battlefield, we can either tap or untap target creature or scry one, which is really important because we could end up tapping an important creature of our opponents, or we can scry one to see if there's a land next, or if we don't need a land, we can put that on the bottom of our library. And Retreat to Kazandu, we can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or we can gain 2 life. I think the best thing here is putting a +1/+1 counter on our commander, making it even bigger, and we might even kill someone with commander damage. We can promote a lot more landfall triggers with our ramp cards with cards like Skyshroud Ranger and Llanowar Scout. We can tap these creatures and we can put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. So we're going to be drawing a lot more cards just by ramping. We have cards like Cultivate and Rampant Growth, which are just classic ramp spells in EDH. We get to search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. We have Sylvan Scrying, where we can search for a land card, reveal it, put it into our hand, and then shuffle our library. So we don't have to search for a basic. If we really need Command Tower, we can get that. We can play even more lands with cards like Explore, Growth Spiral, and Urban Evolution. We're going to be able to draw cards, and we can play an additional land, which is going to make us draw even more cards. And then we have Rites of Flourishing, which is good for every player, but it lets each player draw an additional card at their draw step, and each player can play an additional land on each of their turns. So that can be another card we're drawing off of our commander. Even though it's good for every player, we're going to get the most benefit out of playing an additional land. So besides drawing cards off of our commander, we have some draw spells like Preordain, Gush, Factor Fiction, and Compulsive Research. These just straight out are going to get cards into our hand, but what's really nice about Gush is that we have the option to not pay its mana cost. We can actually return 2 islands to our hand and then just draw 2, and that's more lands we can play with our commander. We're going to need removal to take care of our opponents, so we have cards like Acidic Slime. When it enters the battlefield, it can destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land, and it also has Death Touch, so if our opponents try to hit us, we can block. And then we have Terastodon. When it enters the battlefield, it can destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents, and they're going to be getting a 3/3 green elephant creature token instead of that permanent. Kenrith's Transformation is one I have to recommend with dealing with commanders. It's an enchantment aura that can enchant a creature, and when it enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card, and this is just for 2 mana. The enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3/3. So this is a really handy one to put on someone else's commander because they can no longer use their abilities and it's just a 3/3, and the only way they're going to get rid of it is if they sack it or they block with it. We also have Broken Bond, where we can destroy an artifact or enchantment, and then we can also put a land from our hand onto the battlefield, so even more triggers and more cards to draw. When it comes to the board wipes, we have cards like Whelming Wave, where we're going to return all creatures to their owner's hand except for Krakens, Leviathan, Octopuses, and Serpents, which our commander is a serpent, so we're going to be able to keep Aesi on the battlefield, but most likely our opponents aren't playing any of these sea creatures. And then we have Aetherize. We can return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand, so this is going to be a really big surprise for our opponent. Some of the huge creatures we have in this deck are going to be cards like Simic Sky Swallower, Malimo Maro Sorcerer, Inkwell Leviathan, and Stormtide Leviathan. We're going to be having a lot of mana, and so casting these creatures are going to be fairly easy, and they do work. Simic Sky Swallower is actually really powerful because it having Shroud, it's going to be harder for our opponents to get rid of. Malimo Maro Sorcerer, its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we control, and we're going to have a lot of lands on our battlefield, and it has Trample, so it's going to get through and hit our opponent. Inkwell Leviathan, it also has Shroud, Island Walk, and Trample. And then we have Stormtide Leviathan. It has Island Walk, and then it says all lands are islands in addition to their other types. So this can make it where our forests are islands as well, but it has this last part that's very important. Creatures without flying or Island Walk can't attack, so this will probably make a lot of combat not happen, even on our side. So we have to make sure when we play this card, we can be able to win the game. Now I have to talk about some card interaction I faced while playtesting this deck. Risen Reef and Zendikar Royal is actually a really interesting card combination. So Risen Reef says, whenever Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield under your control, you look at the top card of your library. If it's land, you put it on the battlefield, and if it's not, you're going to put it into your hand. Well, when a land enters the battlefield, Zendikar Royal is going to make a 2/2 green elemental creature token. So we can make a lot of tokens, and we can draw a lot of cards with these 2 cards together. If you're looking to upgrade the deck, there's a lot of easy ways to do this, and I would recommend having cards that let you play additional lands with cards like Azusa, Lost But Seeking, Wayward Swordtooth, and Sakura Tribe Scout. By putting more lands on the battlefield, we get to draw more cards with our commander, and we can trigger more landfall stuff with cards like Avenger of Zendikar. When it enters the battlefield, we create a 0/1 plant creature token for each land we control, and since we have a bunch of lands, and we can play a lot of lands, we're going to have a lot of plant tokens, and we can buff them up by giving them +1/+1 counters when a land enters our battlefield. Ramunap Excavator is a really cool one because if we have cards like Terramorphic Expanse in our deck, which we do, we can sacrifice it, get a basic onto our battlefield, and then we can play Terramorphic Expanse again and just keep getting more lands on our battlefield and more triggers and more cards to draw. Lotus Cobra, whenever a land enters our battlefield, we get to add 1 mana of any color. So just by playing a land, we get 1 mana for free, so it's like we're getting 2 mana for playing a land and then tapping it. Nezahal Primal Tide is another huge creature I recommend. It can't be countered, you have no max hand size, which is really nice because we're drawing a ton of cards, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, we draw a card. Tattoo of a Benthic Druid is pretty much our commander, but a little bit cheaper, and we don't get to play an additional land, but still, when a land enters our battlefield, we're drawing card, and we get the gain 1 life part as well. Scute Swarm is very powerful. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, which it's very likely we will, create a token that's a copy of Scute Swarm instead, so we're going to have a huge amount of tokens with this card. And last, I want to talk about Royal Elemental. This is a super mean card. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of target creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. Just by playing 1 land is very powerful, but this card with our commander is really mean because we can play an additional land, and if we have these other cards as well, we can have multiple creatures on our battlefield that we never played. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up button, comment below what you think of this deck tech, and subscribe for more Mango content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.